Well, of course, when we talk about children and their media usage, of course, children use media like children use media in all developed countries, mostly for fun. So they watch TV and play digital games and read comics and so on. But in Finland we have lots of possibilities for children to learn about media and to express themselves through media. Kavi is a Finnish state authority, National Audiovisual Institute, and we are subordinate to the Ministry of Education and Culture, and one of our legal tasks is to promote media education, media skills and safer media environment for children. Of course, we have several different ways of doing this. For example, we do lots of cooperation with other organizations within the field. We promote research and we do a lot of awareness raising, and we are teaching the educators, for example, teachers and librarians or early childhood educators. And we coordinate two major campaigns in Finland. The biggest one is Media Literacy Week, which brings together 50 different organizations, governmental organizations, NGOs, and also private corporations to make resources which are free for all schools and kindergartens and libraries to use during Media Literacy Week, but also during the whole year. And we also promote media literacy and media education in general and contribute to policy development. For example, currently we have an obligation and mandate from the Minister of Culture to revise Finnish media literacy policy, and that's what we are doing now in cooperation with other organizations in the sector. And talking about the other major media literacy campaign, we also coordinate Game Week, which is a game education initiative, and we are coordinating it, but our cooperating organizations are organizing gaming and game education events in all parts of Finland. So this is what we do in practice, but we also take a lot of part in international discussion, especially in EU, but also in cooperation with UNESCO, for example. Not quite. The first Finnish media literacy policy guidelines were drawn in 2013. But media culture changes so fast, and people's way of using media changes very fast, and that's why we need also to revise the policy guidelines. But also because we want to include new target groups. The biggest flaw of the previous guidelines was that it was media literacy guidelines for children and young people. So it was basically for minors and under the age of 18. So now we also want to include adults and all citizens within the realm of the media literacy policy. It needs to be understood that in Finland, schools and teachers have a lot of professional autonomy. So the governmental organization, National Education Agency, is responsible for drawing guidelines for curriculum. Not only for schools, but also for kindergartens and preschools. And all Finnish curriculum guidelines from early childhood education to upper secondary education include also media literacy and digital competencies. What is actually done is that we have these national guidelines, then municipalities can localize them a bit to answer to their needs. And then individual schools can also localize them a bit to fit to the needs of the school. And after all, it's of course the teachers who are carrying out the media education. So we are relying heavily on a professionalism of Finnish teachers who are very highly educated. But how is media education included in curriculum? It's not a separate subject, but it is part of transversal competence area called multiliteracy. And multiliteracy is based on broad understanding of text. So reading and writing doesn't mean only that we understand the letters and can write them, but we also need to understand audiovisual material, images, different kind of symbols, and so on. And this transversal competence area of multiliteracy is supposed to be promoted throughout all education, which means that within all subjects. But that's not all. Media issues, media literacy issues are also discussed under specific subjects. For example, in Finnish literacy and language, critical media literacy and source criticism is discussed more. And for example, visual literacy and reading images is discussed more in arts. It is a good question, and you are very much to the point, because it is a very wide thing. We all know that we get information from so many sources, for example, newspapers, books, comics, infographics, videos, films, and so on. And how I'm introducing it to teachers when I'm conducting, for example, in-service training for teachers, I start by making them think how media is intertwined in our lives, not only in working and studying, but also in our everyday lives. For example, when I asked that how many of you today woke up in an alarm clock that is actually your smartphone, it's almost everyone who says that the first thing they grab in the morning is probably a smartphone. It can be also the last thing because they set the alarm clock again and go to sleep. When I talk to teachers who are teaching children and young people, or why not adults, when they start thinking about their everyday life and studying and working and influencing in society, it's pretty much self-evident that it's all intertwined with media. And that is what makes it so important, that we understand what it's all about, that we can use it for fun, of course, but also for expressing our own ideas, for using it responsibly, and for contributing to society. Actually, many of the target groups can be reached in the same ways that young people have been reached. Well, if I start with libraries, we have a huge, very well operating public library network in Finland, and Finns are very active library users. So libraries have done a great work, also, of course, with young people and children, but with adults also. They're very active in teaching and guiding them in everyday practices, like how do you use email, or how do you use tablet computer, and so on. But also they have done workshops and guidance with critical media literacy. And for example, if we provide some free awareness raising material, they are very often eager to disseminate those to adults. So libraries are a very important point. Then, just like with children, we have also lots of community colleges and other places for adults, of course also for young people, but also for adults to learn. So they can have separate courses about media skills. They are most often operational media skills. For example, how to take better pictures, or how to film your own movie, but sometimes also critical media literacy. So these free or almost free with very reasonable admission fee courses and possibilities to attend are very important. And then, of course, we have also a basic education curriculum for adults, for those adults who are, for example, immigrants with no previous education, or they may be previous school dropouts who didn't complete their basic education when they were young. And media literacy and media education is also included in a basic education curriculum for adults. And then we have organizations like our national broadcasting operator Yle. which offers lots of free teaching and learning materials, both for children and young people, but also for adults. So there's lots of free access material online, so adults can also learn by themselves. And for example, if you look at the materials I provided you, we have the populism bingo. It's targeted to adults when they are watching political debates. They are able to read to analyze the discourses used in debates by if you turn it around, there's this bingo sheet. So you can tick the box if you find elements of populism in the speech. And of course, this is just a game, so it's not some kind of serious analysis tool that you can say who's populist and who's not. But this is a funny and gameful way to discuss with your friends when you are listening to what politicians promise you. That do we think that this is populism or not? And when it comes to adults, I must say that we also have active associations who are promoting media literacy skills among seniors especially. In Finland, in media education, we have this great situation that we have so many active civil society organizations which are promoting media literacy in all sectors and all target groups. Well, there are too many places and organizations to name them all. And of course, I also need to highlight this, that probably most of media literacy education is carried out in everyday work of schools, kindergartens, libraries, youth houses, and so on. And also, it is very hard to say how many young people attend media literacy activities after school, because we have, again, so many organizations, at least 100 organizations in Finland that are arranging something related to media education. But I can give you some examples of different kind of projects that are meant for children and young people. For example, here in Kavi, we participated in a larger project called Art Testers, which was targeted to youngsters who are 14 or 15-year-old. And Kavi's part of these art testers included film screenings, learning materials about the film, and then a review platform in which the young people commented on the film they saw. And we had more than 5,000 young people attending this kind of project during years 2017-2018. So this is an example of project that reaches a lot of young people, but mostly only once. If I give you another example from public sector, they have a thing called Youth Voice Editorial Board. And this kind of news and journalism making activity involves only like 40 young people every year, but they are very committed, they meet regularly, so it means that they are aiming to produce some good quality journalism, and they also publish with established Finnish news agents. So it's totally different kind of course, more deep learning if you attend every week or so. We have lots of variety here, and it also needs to be understood that we have some organizations in Finland that focus entirely on media education, but then we have lots and lots of organizations who mostly focus on something else, for example, youth work in general, but media education is one of their many activities. It's mostly a volunteer basis, so we are not telling anyone what to do. So we trust that the organizations, that they have good knowledge about their own field they are working with, and they know their audiences and their own stakeholders. And how we are coordinating these actions, we have, well, for example, we have this Media Literacy Week, And there we have like 50 different organizations, and it can the participating organizations can vary from Facebook to NGO with 2 people working there, so it's a huge variety. Every year when we start preparing for the Media Literacy Week, we have this kind of kick-off meeting for potential cooperation organizations, so we are inviting everyone, and they can join, and they can tell us if they would like to be a part of Media Literacy Week. And if they want to be part of Media Literacy Week, they can choose the way they want to participate. For example, they can make their own campaign, but brand it under the label of Media Literacy Week. Or they can join us in making new resources, new campaigns. And that's why we are like bringing everyone together, but they can do their own thing, which they know the best. And we also arrange every year Finnish Media Education Forum, which is a meeting place for media education professionals. And there we discuss important issues in promoting media education. And we also have this kind of activity we call speed dating. So they can kind of pitch their own ideas if they are, for example, looking for new cooperating organizations. So they can have this 5-minute pitch and discuss a little bit with each other and make people aware of what they are doing. In many cases, it actually goes throughout the Finnish system that we are not controlling very much. It's the same with schools, for example. I know that in many countries, the government can actually provide even lesson plans for teachers, but in Finland we trust that highly educated professional teachers know best what to do with their class, and we just give them the resources, and everything we produce is free for schools, for example, to use, and that's also one rule in Media Literacy Week, that if some organization wants to be a part of Media Literacy Week, the resources they are providing need to be free for those schools and kindergartens and libraries and other local organizations that participate to Media Literacy Week. It's fair to say that it's mandatory for education providers to carry out media education, and not actually just in elementary school, but also in preschool and in kindergartens. So it's basically mandatory for education providers since the children are born. It is written in the curriculum, for example, that children need to have possibilities to develop digital skills, or studying need to happen both in traditional way and also in digital environments. And in some subjects there are some content areas that are said to be discussed. That, for example, safe and responsible use of ICT, for example, is stated in curriculum. I think the meaningfulness comes from the everyday life. So our world is full of different texts, and it's a kind of a life skill, multiliteracy, that you are able to understand and evaluate different texts and different contexts. And in multiliteracy, also the question of cultural diversity is important, because when we are discussing things like interpreting images, for example, interpreting facial expressions, it can actually divide from culture to culture. How do we are interpreting these things? How do we understand them? So it is very important that we understand that we are getting knowledge from several different sources, not just from books or from newspapers, but for example, when people are watching this record of my interview, people probably are actually reading from the image that I am some kind of specialist because I'm dressed like this, and they understand that this is a specialist talking about special issue because they are reading not just the film, but also my visual expression. And this kind of reading, if it's only implicit and it's not said out loud, that we have different kinds of ways of receiving information, it's not that easy to be aware different kinds of messages you get and how you are influenced, for example, through media. And that's why it's so important that we understand all the different ways of expressing ourselves, but also understanding and analyzing the messages we are getting. I think it's a very good thing because more and more of information is going to the audiovisual form, and it is getting more and more important to be able to interpret what you have seen and what you have heard, and for example, what is the effect of sound in the image. For example, if we think about the famous shower scene from the film Psycho, probably everyone who's seen the film understands that the effect of sound is very important in creating the creepy atmosphere in that scene. And for example, if we would add that sound to the shampoo commercial, it would get really awkward because we would expect that someone is getting killed while washing their hair. So I think it's a very good thing that we have had this kind of multiple text to be analyzed in this test, which is, by the way, the only standardized test in Finnish school system. But of course it's very, very challenging also to teachers because they want to prepare their student very well for higher studies, and many of the teachers, I assume that this was part of the Finnish literacy and language test, was it? Okay. Many of the teachers are not that well trained themselves to teach or to analyze visual images, but that is a question of in-service training. The Ministry of Education and Culture is investing very much every year in supplementary training for teachers who are working. And this is a question of in-service training and how do we organize this kind of training for teachers? How do we organize them enough time in their work that they have time to learn these new things? So it's not just that we change the test and expect them to be just carry out the education how they can, but we need to provide lots of in-service training, and also in-service trainings is one of the things we in Kavi do, but not just us, but higher education institutions are doing lots of in-service trainings, and also NGOs. Yes, because you have to be 18 to vote in Finland, but we have several like these democracy initiatives related to, yes, they have this kind of like playful voting that they practice how it would happen, who they would vote. For example, my kids go to elementary school, and the school's Facebook page, they had this posting that our 12-year-olds, they had these elections also that they had been studying, who are applying to be the parliament members, and then they like arranged the voting as it would be in real life. So they decided who they would like to vote, and then they practiced how it would happen if they could actually vote, and actually kindergartens do it also, not necessarily with the real candidates, but I know some examples from kindergarten that they have, for example, had this playful manner that they had decide that would you like to vote for rabbit or for the turtle or something, and then they had discussed and planned with children the commercials for the applicants, that the rabbit is saying that vote for me, I'm very fast, or things like that, and very cute, that you should vote for me, and the tortoise is saying like, I'm thinking everything very throughout, and then they make their own elections. So this kind of also democracy skill can be practiced even in kindergarten. And actually in kindergarten curriculum it's said that media education is a way to promote children's participation in society. Well, there's many ways, and of course you should adapt it to the people you're working it. But for example, if you start with young children, say in preschool or elementary school, you can, for example, walk around your neighborhood and take pictures with children about the places you like the most, and if there's, for example, some scary places for children or lots of rubbish or things like that. And then you can investigate with children that how you could affect this issue. For example, if you are worried about that there's so much trash around, then you can maybe contact municipality saying that we took these pictures and we saw that we should get more cleaning here. And or if you find some super nice places, then you can discuss with them that what is nice about them and how we can support this kind of environment. And with older young people, you can, for example, make your own vlogging to, for example, to YouTube, or make your blog posting and how you express your opinion, how you want to, if you want to influence people, how it's done. If I go back to the example of lots of garbage around, for example, if you are just writing a blog posting saying that there's lots of garbage around, people probably don't believe you. They're saying that you're just nagging about some small thing. But if you also include like pictures or video images of lots of trash around, then people believe you better. And this kind of thing, you can also for example, when it comes to elections, you can, for example, make young people study what the parliamentaries have promised and compare to what they have actually done. And for example, if you are working with young adults, you can make them compare their own social media feed, that who are the politicians that you see, because we know that, for example, in Facebook, there's lots of micro-targeting. So the politician I see, it's probably different from what my husband sees or what my neighbor sees. So I think it's also very important, for example, to compare, that you make a list of, like, it's 2 weeks before elections, who are the politicians that you see in your Facebook feed or your Twitter feed. And then you make a list and then you compare with others, and sometimes you actually can see even same politicians saying different things to different voters. Like, for example, to me, they could, for example, profile me that probably I'm interested in what happens to children and education. So they would say that I'm pro-children and child welfare and pro-education. And if they would compare to someone else, they could say that traffic is most important to me. And I think it's very important media literacy skill also to understand how the logic of social media targeting works. Well, actually, to start with controlling YouTube, actually there is now a new audiovisual media services directive in EU, which actually includes also video service platforms under some kind of regulation. So we don't know quite yet what will happen with regulating YouTube, because of course it's a huge issue. And if we rely only on country of origin principle, then regulating YouTube is the problem of our colleagues in Ireland, so huge task. But there is going to be some kind of changes actually in regulating also video platforms. But in Finland, of course, the situation is the same across the world, that YouTube is a great opportunity for people to express themselves. You don't have to be professional journalist or have to have lots of money for your productions to get big audiences. So in that sense, it's an amazing platform. And it's also, and not just YouTube, but now we're talking YouTube since it's by far the biggest. And also it has changed the way how people teach and learn, and I think it's very important because, as we all know, the enormous amount of tutorials watched and created to YouTube every day, and they can be, of course, they can be commercial, but I would say that most of them are non-commercial, that people are teaching other people just for the fun and just to help other people, and I think it's an amazing thing. And probably all of us have also learned some new skills, baking or fixing car or whatever in YouTube. But because the platform is so big, there is also the negative sides. For example, lots of copyright violations or content that is might be harmful for children. Like you told me, disinformation, hoaxes, and so on. But on the other hand, I must say that it's also kind of practical media literacy training. If you fall in some hoax, then you probably know better next time that this was a hoax and you shouldn't trust anything, just like that. And actually many of the very popular vloggers in YouTube are actually also targeting issues like, they are discussing issues like conspiracy theories or fake news. But how we target this issue is, well, with media education, that it's very important for everyone to understand that everything you see or everything you read is not necessarily true. And now it's getting even more complicated since we see the rise of so-called deepfake videos. For example, you can actually make me say anything. If you wouldn't have any moral, you could actually make me say all different things than I'm saying here. And that's why it's also very important to learn some patience. It's because you can't actually just, if you are seeing a deepfake video, someone talking, someone like Barack Obama talking some nonsense, you can't actually tell whether it is true or not. Or if you see a picture of a crime scene, you can't actually see from the picture, from the first gaze, whether this crime scene is the real place that is discussed, because it's much used in disinformation, fake news and propaganda, that you take images from some other event and say that, for example, there was a picture of a child badly injured and spread it that some kind of, as far as I remember, it was something like the child was beaten by immigrants or something like that. Actually, the child was bit by a dog. So it's not just how you rationalize things in your head, but also you need to learn some patience, that you don't go with your first impression, that you actually wait a little bit until you spread some article or video and try to figure out whether this issue is discussed also in other aspects. This is something that also traditional media should do better, because we know, for example, if there's a terrorist attack or something, everyone is rushing to be the first to publish something about the issue. And we know that also traditional media is making mistakes because they must publish within 5 minutes or something like that. So there's of course also mistakes with traditional media, but it's very important to understand different kinds of ways that this information is spread online, and even though there are these tricky cases like deepfake videos, many of the disinformation cases are not that clever. So you could, for example, check if this so-called news, is it new? Is it something that has been discussed like 3 years ago previously? And you could check, for example, that is this actually even possible? There are many cases that sound ridiculous and are not true, but it's also important in education to make people reflective on their own actions and values, because we know that when people believe in this information, it's most likely something that supports their own beliefs. So you believe, no matter how stupid the case is, if it's according to your beliefs true, you probably believe it. But if it's something that you don't believe, then you are very skeptical. And that's why it's not just a question of media literacy, but it's the question of all education, that we should encourage children and young people from the very early age to ask questions, to criticize the system, to not believe everything what they are told, and to express their opinion respectfully and truthfully, and also to evaluate and reflect their own values and actions. I know that in some international comparisons, Finland is doing well when we are comparing people's capabilities for critical media literacy. But of course it is impossible to say what people in general think, because it varies a lot. We have people who are very much aware, who understand very well what's going on in media, and then we have people who don't understand almost anything on the logics of how media works. And on the other hand, we also know that we have, for example, these populistic discourses that are intentionally diminishing people's trust in for example, government or traditional journalism or research. So we have this kind of forces that around the globe, I guess, that are trying to tear down the trust in society. But in Finland, we rank very, very high in trust in society. And I think that is also, it's a huge issue, but it is an important, bigger issue when it comes to media literacy, that eventually, no matter how media literate we are, for example, if I'm reading a newspaper in the morning before going to work, I don't have time for fact-checking. I just have to trust that this newspaper is providing me the facts and real news and is not too biased. And that's why we also need to strengthen the trust in society in a way that, for example, people in general would trust that I, as a governmental media literacy specialist, that I'm promoting good things for Finnish people and I'm not part of some evil conspiracy. I think that we also have a tricky issue with media literacy in a sense that people who believe in fake news media, people who believe in conspiracy theories, they actually believe that they are themselves super media literate. They believe that the others, those who believe in traditional news media or what I'm saying, are like stupid sheeps who don't understand anything, and they have the deeper knowledge. So it is a tricky issue, and that's why it's also important that we are not saying that media literacy is about being skeptical towards everything, and and that it's not some kind of media nihilism that's saying that everything is the same and everyone has their evil background. But I think in Finland we have a good thing in that sense that we have a high-level public education. So people in general are very well educated. We have this public broadcasting service that is also providing media literacy materials. Libraries are super important if you think about common knowledge amongst citizens. So I think in Finland situation is in many sense very good, but we also need to work hard to keep up the trust and to make people critical, but not critical only in negative sense. I think to summarize, I could say that in a world full of media, media literacy is a key competence for having a good free time, being able to work in ever-changing working environments, be able to study, and also be able to influence in society, because social media is getting more and more important in getting your voice heard in society. But I must also underline that being literate is only a sub-goal, because in life there are more important things than being literate in general. And it is a bigger issue of promoting peace and democracy in society, and it's also an issue of economy in terms of working skills. But in the end, it's a question of overall education and how to live a satisfying and happy life in 21st century.